All right, very good. We'll make our way back to our seats. Because if you're an introvert, and I am one, that was about all you could handle, right? Like, okay, enough. Yeah, your palms are sweating, right? I know. I get it. All right, we are in a new series. The series is on truth. And the series graphic is up here. And what I would love for you to do is when you have time, take a look at this series graphic. You will find it on Facebook. You will find it on the church's website. It's one of those graphics where what you think you see at first glance is not what's actually there. Okay? So as you begin to study this, you realize, oh, wait a minute, I thought something was happening, but that's not actually what's happening at all. I'm not sure I know what's happening. So I'm just going to leave it right there. That's our series. It's on truth. And as we go on, that picture will become more clear. One of the things, if you're going to talk about truth, is at some point, we got to get honest. And believe it or not, as Christians, we have some of the hardest time being honest with ourselves, being honest with others. But we're going to try to start that today, so let's be honest. Most of us already know what to do. Would you agree? Like, if we have problems, the problem is it's not that we don't know what to do. We know what to do. So, if someone comes along and tells us what to do, we automatically realize just because you tell me what to do doesn't help me do it. Right? Just because you tell me what I'm supposed to do, it doesn't help me do it. Or just because you tell me who I'm supposed to be doesn't help me become that person. If that was the case, if all we had to do was just tell people what to do and who to be, then guess what? We wouldn't need the New Testament at all. You could rip that entire second half of the Bible out because the law and the prophets told us what to do and who to be. And yet Israel read from the law and read from the prophets, and they said, we get it. We know what it says. But there's something in here that's wrong. There's something when I look inside of me that says, just because you tell me what to do and tell me who to be, there's something wrong inside of me that I can't seem to quite do it. And with Israel, there was a longing that started to take place, a longing inside of them that someone could come and make it right. There was a promise that there was a someone, not a something. There was a someone who could come and who could make this thing right for us. And in the Gospel of John, turn there with me, the very first chapter. What John is trying to do from the very first page is to speak to a people who is longing for some change. They are longing for someone to come and help make things right. And John is wanting to introduce that person. We've done a lot of work in John chapter 1, verse 1. We've done a lot of work in John chapter 1, verse 14. But I can't remember ever doing a lot of work with you guys on John chapter 1, verse 17. So today, that's where we're going to hang out. Is that okay? John chapter 1, verse 17. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. That's better than it might seem at face value. So I'm going to read that again. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. Some of us have sadly never experienced grace. I know, being a pastor, that if you get in a room this large, there's probably someone in the room that has actually never experienced grace. You don't know what it is. You don't know what it feels like because all your life people have treated you according to the law. They've told you what you're supposed to do and what you're supposed to be. And they've told you all these things. And so you've grown up and you've never actually experienced grace. And so you're probably also dealing in law with the people around you. Because if that's what you've been taught, that's all you know to do, right? So if all you were ever taught was the law, you probably only know how to live according to the law. And here's where we really start to mess it up. If you want to know where we really start to get it wrong as Christians, it's when we start talking about Jesus and yet we're speaking from the law. That gets really confusing for people. We start mouthing about grace, but what we're really saying and doing is communicating law, then the people around us get super confused about what's going on. And unfortunately, I think that's what we have done. And so it's created in us this sense of that we have been raised maybe in the church. But if you were raised in the church, you might have been raised on Moses and not on Jesus. And John is saying that it's time to turn our attention toward Jesus. So there's some distinctions that we need to draw, some contrast between law and grace. I haven't done that in quite a while, so I want to do it again. Anytime I need to know about grace, I want to turn to an old pastor. His name is Alexander McLaren. Some of you will find him. Jackie and I have been doing some work on commentaries. So when you go to the commentaries, Jackie, and you find McLaren, we're talking about Alexander McLaren. He lived in the late 1800s. And so believe it or not, when people start talking grace in 2025, we didn't just invent this stuff. If you go and listen to McLaren, he's talking about it in the 1800s. The early fathers are talking about it. But I want to read some of the things that McLaren says because he says it better than I can. Moses was the lawgiver. Jesus is the grace giver. In fact, we get a picture in the Gospels of this. We know in the Old Testament that Moses climbed Mount Sinai to give the people the law. But we also know in Matthew 5, 6, 7 that Jesus climbed up on a mountain. We call it the mountain of beatitude. And he speaks about the 10 commandments, but he speaks about it from grace. And so we're supposed to see those two contrast. The Old Testament, Moses climbs up on a mountain and gives the people the law. In the New Testament in Matthew, Jesus climbs up on a mountain and he gives grace. What is grace? Well, let's keep going. Law works from the outside in. Grace works from the inside out. Ooh, I likes that a lot. In fact, I want you to do this today. I want you to figure out where the pressure's coming from. Where is the pressure in life coming from? Is it coming from the outside where you're being crushed by people's expectations? You're being crushed by your own expectations. You're being crushed about what you think you should and shouldn't do. Where's the pressure? Is it coming from the outside and is it crushing you? Or is the pressure coming from the inside? And if pressure's coming from the inside, it feels an entirely different way. In fact, it feels like motivation. It feels like desire. It's pressure, but it's a whole different kind. So let's be clear. The law is pressure from the outside to try to get you to conform on the inside. Grace is pressure on the inside that causes your walk to match your talk. That's good stuff. Law demands, grace gives. You ever notice that you can't satisfy the law? You can't do enough. And if you do more, well, you can always do even more than that. So the law just keeps demanding. It keeps asking for more. But grace doesn't actually demand anything. Grace gives, and gives freely. And it gives not based on what you're going to do with it when you get it. Oh, isn't that good? How many people give stuff, but you know they want a little something in return? That doesn't feel like a gift at that point, does it? So let me tell you that grace is a gift. It is a free gift. And when God gives you grace, guess what? You get to do whatever you want with it. You're a free person. It's just a gift. Law has no heart, but grace is the unveiling of the heart of God. Every time there is law, you're not going to be able to see God clearly. Because the law always veils. The law creates a veil. Remember the temple? The temple has a veil. And the purpose of the veil is to separate. It separates us from God. And anytime we live by the law, we recreate a veil which separates us from God. And so we will not see God clearly if we are living by the law. But when you move the veil back, and sometimes you can't move the veil back, they won't let you, so you got to tear the veil in two. And when you tear it in two and you get to look in, ooh, what do you see? Oh, I see God. And how do you see God? John is telling us very clearly, you see God in Jesus. We're going to get to that, though. Law is about duty. Grace is about desire. You'll hear people under law say a lot of things like this. They'll use shoulds. You should do this. We should do that. As Christians, you should this and that. You ought to do this. You ought to do that. Anytime you hear the shoulds and the oughts, recognize you are hearing someone and they are probably speaking law to you at that point. Grace speaks about desire and says, do what you want to do until what you want to do is right. It's about a conforming of the inside. Law needs the terror of retribution. Grace works through compassion and human weakness. You ever notice that as a society, and now I'm going to move out of the law of Israel, I'm just going to talk about the law in general. Do you understand that the law of the land is what it is because there is someone who carries a big stick and a gun and a taser? Y'all act like y'all don't know what I'm talking about. In societies, there is law, but the only reason people really obey the law until they're under grace is because there is someone carrying a big stick who can punish you and do things to you if you don't do what you should do, what you ought to do, what they say. So law, it has to have a sense of retribution. It has to make you scared because the reason it can make you do things is because you're scared of what will happen to you if you don't. That's how the law of the land works. But unfortunately, as Christians, that's how we've told the world that God works too. The object of the law is regulation. The object of grace is revelation. Regulation versus revelation. Israel had regulations, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't get there. They could never be enough. And so what is John telling us in the gospel? He says, for the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. What is he saying? Jesus said, you don't know what grace and truth even look like. So what does Jesus do? This incredible plan of God. He says, I'm going to step through the veil, and I'm going to step on the other side. And then when you see me, you will have seen God. There's this word that I've been using. It's called embodied. And I like it a lot. I don't know that anyone else is going to like it a lot. But when Jesus steps through the veil, he embodies the very nature and character of God. And what John is saying is when we saw Jesus, and even now when you see him through the Word, you're supposed to look at Jesus and go, oh, that's what God looks like. We didn't know. You got to put yourself back before Jesus. They did not know what grace and truth looked like. Here's the great tragedy. We live on the other side of the cross, and sometimes we don't know what grace and truth look like. And the way you get people to understand grace and truth is you point them to the person who embodies all that God is. It's called incarnation. We studied that, right? John chapter 14. And the Word became what? Flesh. What does that mean? God said, I know that you're not getting it. And I know that you're not going to get it. But I have a plan. And it's going to help you get it. Jesus takes all that is God and he becomes all that is man so that you can lay eyes on God. How many of you have ever said, if I could just see God, if I could see him, I could believe him? But he's invisible. Well, yes, he's invisible, but he's also incarnate. He is Jesus. If you want to know what God looks like, look at Jesus. And if somebody has told you something about God that doesn't look like Jesus, you should study that. Because it might not be God. Because in Jesus, the fullness of deity dwells. So he embodies this thing, and we begin to realize what God looks like. And then God begins to speak through Jesus, and Jesus begins to speak, and he begins to teach. But you remember what the ordinary people said? they would listen to Jesus and they go, whoo, that man speaks with authority. Do you remember them saying that? When Jesus spoke, they would stand in awe and gather around him, and they would go, whoo, we never heard nothing like that. They're like, this man speaks, but he speaks with authority. Where does authority come from? If you go back to our series on power that we just finished up, most of us think authority comes from somebody who can impose their will on you by some means or another. They're stronger than you. They have something that they can force you to do things. But that's not what we're talking about with Jesus. And so he speaks with authority. Where does this authority come from? It comes from the fact that he does what he says. He lives the very nature of his message. He's the embodiment of his message, meaning that he doesn't just talk the talk. You've heard that. This man's walking the walk. We've never seen this before. This man speaks with authority. So I'm back to McLaren. I want to read this to you. He says, he does not speak about it. He brings it. How many of you play ball? And when you want to tell somebody, you say, boy, they brought it, right? Bring it. Come on, bring it. McLaren back in 1800, he might have been the one that invented that. He said, Jesus doesn't just speak about it, he brings it. He does not just show us God by his words, he shows us God by his example. He does not preach about him, but he lives him. He manifests him. Jesus is gentleness and compassion. He's miracles. He's wisdom. He's patience. He's tears. He's promises. That's what God looks like. This is God. This is God. And his name, John says, that's interesting. Don't overlook that. It's Jesus Christ. That doesn't mean that Jesus is his first name and Christ is his last name. It's not like saying Brantley Taylor. Oh, that's Jesus Christ. Jesus is his earthly name. Christ is his heavenly name. Jesus was the name that was given to the man-child. His name shall be called Jesus. Christ comes from the word anointed one. It comes from the word promised one. And so in this name that John is saying, the two have come together. Man and God have come together in this person, Jesus. Now there is no separation. The two have been made one. I was hoping you'd think that, because it felt like good news to me too. Grace and truth as a living reality has flashed in the darkness. Remember what Scripture says? That in the darkness there shone a great light. What is that great light? It is that Jesus has become flesh. Now that's what it says about grace. That gives us some idea about grace. Are you still feeling where the pressure comes from in your life? Is the pressure in your life coming from the outside and it's crushing you? Or is it coming from the inside and it's pushing you forward? It's compelling you into something. Where's the pressure coming from? We talked about grace. Now let's talk about truth. Verse 17, for the law was given through Moses, grace and truth, not just grace, but grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. Go over, if you will, to the end of John. John chapter 18. John chapter 18. And while you're going to John chapter 18, here's something that I just think is interesting. Matthew, Mark, and Luke hardly mention truth. They mention it when Jesus says, very verily, I'll tell you the truth. That's kind of the context that you get it in. John is often speaking about the truth. He says that Jesus come that we might have grace and truth. If you remember, Jesus tells his disciples, I am the way, the truth. He speaks about the truth often in John. And this is one of my favorites. He's standing before Pilate at the time of where they're questioning Jesus. And the question is if Jesus is a king. And Jesus answered him and he said, for this I have been born, and this I have come into the world to testify to the truth. He says, I am the living embodiment of the truth. I came to testify to the truth. And Pilate looks at him and he says the same thing that people in the world are asking today. He looks at Jesus, he says, what is truth? I'm like, if you don't think the Bible is current, how many people are trying to Google and search for things and watch the news and then watch another news and then read this and read that, and by the time you get done, you're like, I have no idea what is true anymore. I don't know what's true. Pilate is looking at him and he says, what is truth? Truth is a person, and truth is Jesus, and the truth is standing right before Pilate, and he doesn't know it. And so for us, sometimes we are still confused about the truth. For us, sometimes it becomes this thing of can we, do we have our facts straight about the Bible? Do we have our theology straight? Do we have our beliefs straight? And in fact, we'll even say things like this, well, sometimes you just got to tell people the truth. That's the impression I get when we say things like that. Did you see the face I made? It was not a pretty face, in case you couldn't tell it. But they're like, you got to tell people the truth. People need to know what they're doing. You need to tell people the truth. I'm like, yes, you do. But when you do it, you ought to sound more like Jesus than like Moses. Oh. Wait a minute, what? Yeah, when you're speaking the truth, Moses is no longer your example. Jesus is your example. So if you're going to tell the truth, tell it like Jesus told it. I think that we are biased. Now let me tell you where I think our biases are. We are biased toward telling the truth over showing the truth. I think there's something inside of us that if you put telling and showing the truth on a scale, that we way more value telling people the truth than we do showing them the truth. And if you were listening to the message, you heard that when Jesus came, we had been told the truth. That ain't why he came. He came so that he could show us the truth, so that he could be the truth. We had heard the truth. We knew the truth. But we never actually seen anybody do it. And I think there's still a bias inside of us that we would prefer to tell people the truth. Why do we prefer to tell people the truth? Can I offer you some suggestions? I don't mean to be prying into any of our businesses, but I'll pry into mine, and then if anything hits home, you'll just know, oh, Lord, he wasn't just reading his own mail, he was reading mine. I think that we continue to have a bias toward telling people what to do versus showing them what to do, because we know that when we can use words to bend people and make them do what we want. And so we tell them what the Bible says because we're trying to make them do what we want them to do as Christians. And we become very good at it. In fact, I'll just confess that as pastors, we're some of the best. If you want to ever be guilted and shamed, you should just set up a coffee engagement with a pastor, because we do it better than anybody. I mean, we know how to make people feel guilty. We know how to make people ashamed. And we do it for the best possible reasons, because we're trying to get people to do what's right. But after a few years, I've just realized, you know what? Guilt and shame wear off, and even if they didn't wear off, that's not how you're supposed to do it. That's not how you do it. That's how Moses was told to do it, to show us that there is a better way when Jesus does it. We like to make people do what we want them to do. And oftentimes we weaponize the Bible to do it. Show them that picture up there of the plane again. That picture, that plane is not dropping bombs. When you look at it closer, when you go home, it's dropping seed. It's not dropping bombs. It's dropping bags of seed. And it's to make the point that as Christians, we've fallen too in love with truth bombs. That's a truth bomb. That's a mic drop. Boy, we told them. We let them have it. We become too in love with truth bombs, and we should have been dropping seed. The Word is seed, and truth is seed. It's not a bomb. And what else do we do it? Well, quite frankly, it's just easier. Isn't it? It's just easier to tell people what to do. I mean, you tell them what to do, and it's faster. It's a lot faster than showing them, right? Because if you show them, they're going to have to walk alongside of you to watch you do it. And I mean, who actually wants somebody that close? That was sarcastic. I think you got it, right? It's being a little sarcastic. Yeah. Why do we want to tell people? We want to tell people because we're lazy. I said we need to get truthful and honest with ourselves, right? To be honest is that a lot of times we tell people the truth because we want something that's quick and easy. And then if we tell people the truth, then we told them, and then we can be just like Pilate. What did he do? Then I can wash my hands of it because I told them. I told them the truth. And in fact, we can even check the box if we want to. And we can say, I have fulfilled my obligation to what? To telling people the Bible, or to tell them what God said. And why did we do it? We didn't do it because we cared about them. We did it because we wanted to manipulate them, make them change in a way that benefited us, that made life easier for us. Like if they were all the way on the other side of the world, we wouldn't care a hoot about them anyway. That got honest. We tell them the truth because it's easy. We can wash our hands of it, and I can check the box that said I did it, and they didn't respond to it, and so that's on them. I done my part. If you want to feel self-righteous, drop a truth bomb. If you want to help somebody, plant seed. If you want to feel self-righteous, and man, it feels good, I ain't going to lie to you. If you want to feel self-righteous, keep dropping truth bombs. But if you want to change someone's life, then plant seed. Drop seed. Here's another one. We confuse the fact that if we say that we know something, or a pastor preaches something, or a teacher teaches something, and if we've heard that before and we kind of know what it means, we go, yes, that's the truth. But the truth isn't, and you've heard this before, so I'm not going to make a big deal about it. The truth is not what you know in here, it's what you can do with these. It's not about what you know. In fact, I'll put it to you this way. I was just meditating on this week. If you were, let's say you're at the grocery store, and somebody behind you, the line's a little slow, and there's somebody behind you, and you just carry on a conversation with them, and all of a sudden you're like, so what do you do for a living? And they say, I'm a biblical scholar. Most people be like, wow, that's amazing. And you'd be like, what kind? And they could be like, I'm a New Testament Bible scholar. And you'd be like, oh, that's amazing. Or I'm a Pauline scholar. That means they studied Paul. Oh, you must know a lot about Paul. Or I'm an Old Testament scholar, a Hebrew scholar, a Greek scholar. And you'd be like, wow, that's amazing. I have so much respect for you. And now this is not to take away respect from people who have done a lot of work to study things and understand them, because we need to know that. So please don't hear what I'm not saying. But let's just say the next day you walk into the store and you're asking the person what they do, and they say, I'm a swimming scholar. And you go, a swimming scholar? And the person says, yes, I'm a swimming scholar. What in the world is a swimming scholar? Well, I've studied swimming. Like, I know all about it. I can tell you the breaststroke and the freestyle and the butterfly, and I can tell you all of those things and how you're supposed to put your hands and how you start. And I can tell you about all the great swimmers, and I can tell you about the Olympics, and I can tell you about all the things about swimming. You're like, that's really cool. Do you swim? And he looked at you and went, well, of course not. I never learned how to swim. You would be like, what, huh? Wait a minute, you a swimming scholar, but you don't know how to swim? I'm like, oh, no, no. My parents dropped me in the water when I was little, and I've been afraid of it my entire life, so I just decided I'd study it. Next day, you walk in and you meet a baseball scholar, and you probably figure where this is going, right? He tells you all about baseball, curveballs and fastballs and hitting and Mickey Mantle and all the things about baseball, right? World Series championships. And you're like, wow, you must have played a lot of baseball. And he goes, nope, never played. I was always scared I was going to get hit by the ball. What? You're like, You're like, this is really weird. Next day, you have to go back into the grocery store, and there's a dancing scholar. And you're like, you must be a great dancer. You know everything about that. Nope, got 2 left feet. You're like, what is going on? Next day, you go back to the grocery store. Y'all have a lot of groceries to buy, right? And there's someone who is a musical scholar. And you go, wow, you must play or sing great. Can't carry a tune in a bucket. You're like, what is happening here? And I would suggest to you that things didn't start getting sideways when you met the swimming scholar. Things got sideways when you thought that a biblical scholar was somebody to look up to, and you didn't care if they could do it or not. It got sideways when we thought that just because we could quote Scripture, that made us something. But Jesus said, people have been talking about this stuff a long time. I had to send my son to show them how to do it. And that's when we begin to understand that truth is something that maybe we've not thought about or thought about in the right way before. There's this disconnection. And Jesus said, I came to reconnect the Word with reality, grace and truth to be realized. There was a disconnection. Have you ever felt it inside of you that you knew a lot more than you were doing? If you're not, you're lying. Okay? We all do. There's always a disconnect. We always tend to know a little bit more than we're doing. But let me tell you that the secret is not to try to create an image of yourself that appears to be a Bible scholar. I think the right way that we're supposed to approach that is, I'm on this journey, but this is my destination. Jesus is the most compelling thing I have ever seen in my life, and I want to be like him. And that's what it means to be realized. But it's difficult. Ooh! And when you begin to not just tell people the truth, but to show them the truth, it's hard. I'm glad you said that. It's hard. It's messy, isn't it? It's complicated. You're like, I don't even know what I'm doing right now. I mean, I'm trying to love, but I've never been in this situation before. I don't know how to do this. And you know what God is actually saying? Thank you for being honest. Thank you for not pretending. Thank you for not throwing out great biblical phrases. Just approach Jesus and say, I have no idea how to love like this. I have no idea how to do this. God, will you help me? And then truth becomes this. I do a little woodworking. I'm not very good at it, but I like it. But there's a saying in woodworking and in carpentry, when something is true. Have you ever heard of that? When a board is true, it's straight. If you go to the big box stores today, find me a true board. If you've tried to build something, please tell me where you can go find a true board these days. It's like you pick one up and it goes doing. They're like, there are no true boards anymore. But in carpentry, a true board is it is true and it is straight. And when you put it on something, it's level and it is plumb. And when everything looks right, you stand back and you go, it's true. That's true. It's the way it's supposed to be. If you hang a door, you ever hung a door, you got a door in your house, and it doesn't matter where you started, it ends up in a different place? It's like you push it, and it just, it comes back. You know why that happens? Because the door's not true. It's not hanging correctly. Something is not plumb and level, and so you got to call Jackie, and you got to get Jackie to sort it out. One of the hinges has gotten open, and so this thing's not true anymore. So what is true? God is true. God is ultimate reality. A.W. Tozer, you're a fan, right? You remember this quote? A.W. Tozer said, you want to know what reality is? God is reality. God is everything that is true. That's what's true. And when you see Jesus, you have come in contact with the truth. So what are we to do then? Align with truth. Align our lives with Jesus. And how do you do that? Write this down. You love people into alignment. I'm going to say that one more time. You don't have to write it down, but I do hope you'll remember it. You can't talk people into alignment. You can't force people into alignment with Jesus. You love them into alignment. Because the pressure has to be on the inside. Now, some of you are probably going through some things, and there's some pressure on the outside, and it's pressing in on you. You feel like you're suffocating. But what I'm trying to tell you is this: you've got to get an equal and greater pressure on the inside, which is grace and truth, which is helping you to align with Jesus. And then that love of God is going to begin to align you. And then this life, this Christian life, it's no longer about duty. It's not about duty. It's not about Christian duty. It's about desire. It's about desire. Why do people change? People really change when they want to change. When they get a revelation. When they see something different than they've ever seen before. If the world's going to change, you know what they need? They don't need more regulations. They need a revelation of Jesus. And they don't need us telling them what to do. Guess what? We all know. We all know what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do. But what's been missing is for someone who could help us get into alignment with the truth. And it is love that does that. And when someone changes, they have to change because they want to. Where's the pressure inside of you? Stand with me. Zach, are you around? Yeah, I see you coming. Thank you. I want to give you a minute to get honest, because that's part of what this series is going to be about. We just got to get honest with ourselves. Where is the motivating pressure of your life? Where has it been? Some of you may sadly say that I have never known grace. I have only been given the law. The world has always thrown the book at me. You ever heard that saying? You should throw the book at them. Throw the book at them. That'll change them. Throw the book at them. Guess what? If you throw the book at them, it's not going to change them. Yeah. We're not people that throw the book at anyone. We're the people who have had a revelation of Jesus. And we're like, he's everything. That's what love looks like. That's what peace looks like. That's what goodness looks like. That's what grace looks like. That's what truth looks like. Everything that is real, I see it in Jesus. That's it. That's motivation. So then let me end this way as you're feeling that pressure. An old saint, Augustine, he said this: God is the beginning and God is the end. We know that Scripture tells us that God is the Alpha and He's the Omega. Yeah. He also made Himself the way. In John, I am the way, the truth, and the light. So let's see what we're working with here. God is the beginning and God is the end, and Jesus made Himself the way. Now here's good news. If you are on the way, meaning if you are following Jesus, it doesn't even matter how good you are at it. It's just that you keep following. Then guess what? You've already reached the destination. Because the destination is a person. I can't tell you how many Christians don't care anything about Jesus, just want to get to heaven. The destination is not a place. It's a person. If you didn't know that, I want to tell you that today. The destination, the final destination, is not a place. It's Jesus. It's always been a person. So if you are on the way trying to follow Jesus, guess what? Oh, you've arrived. You're exactly where you need to be. Just stay on the way. And he will get you home. Let us pray. Ooh, Father, I pray that kind of worthless pressure on the outside that only makes us change for just a little while until the pressure's gone. Lord, I just ask that somehow the Spirit of God is breathing on something that was read or said or something you spoke directly into someone's heart, so that now there is a pressure of desire filling up on the inside, a fountain flowing from the inside. That is a kind of pressure too, but now it's not that I should or I ought or I must, but it's turned into, ooh, I want to. Oh, I want to be with Jesus. Oh, I want to follow Jesus. Oh, I want to be like Jesus. Oh, Lord, let that well up inside. Let that well up inside of us. We're going to leave the altar open. Kim's our pastor on call. She will be out there at the Connect desk if you need to know anything about the church or have any questions or any of those things.